And we're ready whenever you are, Mayor.
Good evening, and thank you for remotely attending tonight's City Council meeting. The camera in the council chambers is set up to show those attending in person tonight. The platform we are using has a raise hand feature. You will notice a picture of a hand in the upper right-hand corner. When we reach the point in the meeting where the public has the opportunity to address council, you can click the button and be given your opportunity to address council. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Skelly,
Here.
Councilor Dilaba,
Here.
Councilor Fisher,
Here.
Councilor Kennedy, Councilor Powers,
Here.
Councilor Reish,
Here.
Councilor Scamperly,
Here.
quorum present.
Councilor Kennedy has to be excused tonight. So there's a consensus for that. I know she got an emergency going on in her house.
Yeah, I agree. Also, Councilor Reish was called out of town unexpectedly and is participating remotely. At this time, I would ask Councilor Reish to state the address of his location for the record as required.
116 Nautical Point Court, Mooresville, North Carolina.
Okay.
Did you get that, Mike?
We did. We have one presentation tonight from City Comptroller Angela Gray and City Manager Stephen Jelly regarding the 2021 financial report.
Good evening, Council. This evening we'd like to do two things. We will discuss the 2021 closeout and work towards the 2022 State of the City brief. I'd just like to say to all Council, 2021 was by all measures from the City Manager's perspective, success. We managed to do the things that we set out to do, which was stabilize our financial strength, provide some reassurance to our workforce that the hard decisions we were making would be made swiftly and wouldn't be drug out. And we would be able to start to address some of the long-term city problems that have been outstanding for years, excuse me, short-term and long-term. So what we'd like to do tonight is just go over the high points. We've got the slides that you have in front of you as part of our brief. You also have the full end of the year closeout report, which we won't be reviewing that page for page tonight. But if council has questions on anything in that report that you've had to review for a couple of days, we certainly can answer those. So Angela and I are going to take turns here. She's going to start out with part of it, then I'll jump in and we'll go back and forth. So Angela.
All right, thank you. Good evening and welcome. So we're going off the one that has the colored slides on it, but as Steve said, if there are any questions on the traditional end of the year financial report, I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. So just to begin with, as very big highlight here is with your general fund. At the end of the year, we expect to post a surplus of $2.1 million in the general fund. That is related in part to the sales tax revenue being over what we had budgeted. And just to give you that information, the sales tax revenue was over budget about $980,000 approximately. Also, there was several areas which money just through close watch was not spent in the budget, and so that led to our $2.1 million surplus for the year. At the end of the year, the fund balance would be approximately $6.1 million. Some of that fund balance is, as outlined in the financial report, the traditional one you get, not usable, what we would say, but large in part it is. And on the chart here, I kind of walk you through what your fund balance has been from 2016 to present day. And that ranges from at the end of 2016, your fund balance was a little over 600,000 to 6.1 million at the end of 2021 in that 6-year time span, 5-year time span. Any questions on that?
No, it's
Okay.
great.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
And just to kind of give you the beat of the other funds, the water fund had a surplus of just shy of $700,000. The sewer fund had a surplus of just over $400,000. And 2021 is the demarcation point of when the Remington and the library have fully transitioned off as being accounted for under the city's books and records. And so in 2022, as you saw in the budget time, there is no provision for those two entities, and that is why.
Oh, excuse me, Angel.
Yeah.
Could everyone mute? We're getting background noise. Thank you.
So on the next slide that I prepared goes through your general fund revenues. And it basically lists the revenues from largest to smallest. Your largest source of revenue in the city is $5.11 million, and those are your property taxes collected. The sales tax, second largest at $4.7 million. Your state aid comes from aids and incentives to municipalities. That's $1.7 million. Interestingly, looking back through your financial records, it went all the way back to 2015, and it could have happened before, but this has been a completely flat number to the city. So the contribution, which is your third source of revenue, third largest source of revenue, has stayed constant for several years on that line. We do have state aid through grants and other of just shy of $1 million. So that number fluctuates greatly from year to year, depending upon what's going on. Interfund revenue, fourth source of revenue. That's when the water and sewer fund pass money back to the general fund as a reimbursement for expenses. And so that was $815,000 this year. The CHIPS money in 2021 was $776,000. Again, another state number that were awarded in the city that fluctuates from year to year. So there was the year prior, it was probably just going from memory, about half of that in 2020. So again, that is revenue that constantly goes up and down. And then you can see all the rest of your revenues laid out there on that. Yep.
Okay, just picking up now on the real property taxes. I think this is a good point that I'd like to continue having discussion with council as we go throughout the year. If you look in the small block to the right of the line chart, the tax exempt properties in 2021 for the city of Augsburg was 56% of all of our properties tax exempt. I mean, it's a staggering number. And you'll see some other places through a brief here where we're going to quantify for 2021 what that number was worth. And you'll see here where it's just drastic. I mean, it can't be understated how drastic the amount of non-taxable property puts us at a handicap. So, I mean, 44% of the assessable properties in the city is what we get to draw tax base from. I mean, it's by any measure, even if this were a really wealthy community, it would be hard to raise the revenue that we need to run the city through property taxes. So back to the line diagram. I mean, again, you see the drastic drop with the second 10% tax increase gets us down to 2010, 2011 levels of property tax rate. I know there's plenty of different philosophies out there, and there's plenty of different logic, but you know, I don't think there's anything we can do more than we're doing now, but find a way to get these property tax rates harnessed and brought into the reasonable area. I've given you that chart several times on the comparison communities that we use, and you'll see that the average there somewhere around $12 or $13 a thousand, and we've got to try to maintain that. Again, understanding that part of our problem is we have such a significant part of our tax base is we don't draw tax from. The 2022 citywide assessment project is starting, but that will not impact the city until 2024. So again, to continue to emphasize, certainly returning money to people that need it most in the form of tax cuts is certainly been an initiative of this council. But understanding the second and very close to first is this second, is that we were so close to pushing over our constitutional tax limit. And even with these two significant reductions, for the first time in several years, we'll drop below what the city or the state will call the high risk zone. But understand that is also dependent upon a significant number of exclusion debt that we still have. And so as we're going through the good news in this slide, which presentation, as you'll see, we're paying down our debt at a good rate. As we pay down that debt, our exclusions go away. So all we're really doing is we're right now adjusting the finite measure, which really is the tax rate and those exclusions. The way to stay away from that constitutional tax limit is to have the assessable value of your property going up at 4 or 5, 6%, every year or so that you're raising that ceiling and not having the tax rate follow it so closely. We don't have that, at least for 2 more budget cycles. That assessable value number is going to stay the same. It might tick up, a percent here or there, but it's not going to be significant. So right now, what we can control is that tax rate, and that is probably, in my mind, the most significant reason to reduce those taxes is so that we remove the danger that we were going to go over that constitutional tax limit. The next slide, again, this kind of puts in numerics what I'm trying to describe. The total assessed value of the city right now, $676 million. Of that, we tax $287 million. So our tax levy this year will be approximately $4.56 million. The total tax exempt properties represent $376 million. And look in terms of tax dollars, what that would mean. $5.9 million more in taxes if we were able to do that. Combine that with what we're doing, it'd be over $10 million we'd be raising. The hypothetical tax rate that we put down there, I just wanted you all to see if all of the property in Ogdensburg was able to be taxed, and we were just pulling the levy that we set this year, 4.56 million, our tax rate would only be $6.89. So if half of the non-taxable property was included, $9.61, and even if just a quarter of those properties were taxable, look what our tax rate would be, $11.97. Much more reasonable, much more within the same range that the other communities of similar demographic to ours are. And we'd have such a significant amount of cushion in that constitutional tax rate. We'd be in the 40, 50 percentile with lots of room to be able to raise revenue if need be. So I think this to me just continues to underscore something I think, council understands is the impact. But I think to allow the community to understand that this 56% of our properties not being taxable puts us at a significant handicap, and that's why the sales tax is absolutely critical. I mean, it's the only one that we've got the ability right away to adjust.
It's always been the issue.
Yeah, of course.
On these numbers here, do you know how much of that property is state-owned and how much is city-owned?
I do. We didn't put it on the chart. I didn't, but we'll provide council a breakout. One of the things we're going to do, councilor, is there'll be some sub briefs coming from this. There'll be one specifically on this coming up soon, one on debt, where we're going to break all that down, and we'll have the specifics. Because one of the things we're working with the assessor to do is to identify all the nonprofits, all the tax exempt properties, and do a real good scrub and investigation and make sure that everybody is operating within the intent of the law. For having that exemption. Just because a nonprofit owns a property doesn't mean that it automatically is tax exempt. And we've got some areas in the city that I'm concerned. Groups have bought property, they're getting an exemption because they have the status. But if the property is not being used, in direct support or for the mission, then the city will look at providing tax bills to those properties. So we're going to provide an exhaustive analysis on that, and then give council our outcome on.
I think you'll find that the majority of that is the port properties, the bridge to Canada, the psychiatric center, the school district, and city-owned properties, which is the value of like City Hall and things like that. So that's why it's in the community development plan to try and address, some of the surplus lands at the St. Lawrence Psychiatric Center and that the Bridge and Port Authority owns.
John, since you didn't give notification on, days ahead that you were going to be remote, I'm not really sure if you can participate. That's my understanding.
Oh, I'm quite sure that I can.
I'm quite sure he can as well. I mean, he's an elected official who's made an effort to try and get on this call, and regardless of his personal matters, I don't see how you can not have a city official not participate and or comment if necessary.
I didn't make the rule. It was the state rule. We all got notification a few weeks ago about it, so.
You asked him where he was attending from remotely.
I'm just telling you what, you all received a notification.
Okay, so next slide, moving on, I just wanted to identify for council. So this is where the dollars go. So 51 cents of every dollar of property tax goes to the school district, 30 cents to the city, 18 cents to the county, excuse me, and 1 to the library. I point this slide out because it's fine to say we don't run the school, we don't run the county, but from a leadership perspective of the city, I think the city council and the city staff has to be cognizant of where the money's going. And 51 cents of every dollar going towards one organization is a lot. And we've got to start to bridge some gap between the city and the school district and the county, because this is the impact here. We're all fighting for the same dollar. And that's and it's going to get harder and harder. Nobody's business, school district, county government, city government, nobody's business is getting easier. Nobody's business is getting leaner with tasks and missions to do, and certainly nobody's business is getting cheaper. But this is how our breakout goes now. Sales tax revenue. We've talked a lot about this, but I just want council to be prepared. We've really enjoyed 2 very, very healthy years with sales tax and pretty significant increases, $1 million beyond what we projected. We knew we were projecting a little bit conservative in the 2021 budget, but we really felt like the 2020 sales tax year also, it was pretty significant. So we didn't want to count on that being sustainable. It seemed to be, it was obviously sustained through 2021. We were $1 million ahead. We took in about $4 million the year before. So we really were about 700,000 ahead of what we took in the previous year, but we budgeted that 3.7. But things are going to change this year. I don't. There's no simpler way to put it. We all should be, thinking the numbers that we've talked about. This is a $1.7 million hit to our revenue. We've budgeted $3 million, and we'll wait as the money returns start to come in on our own sales tax starting tomorrow. As the city starts to collect their own on March 1st. So I say to council, with all the other challenges that we have, losing that revenue is significant. And we'll talk later in the discussion about actions to solidify the 0.5% and or the 1%. But we shouldn't take this task like there's anything more important than it. We're not going to see additional property tax revenue in the next 2 years. Partly because this council is committed to not raising taxes but decreasing it, and secondly because again we've just now gotten ourselves out of the high risk zone for blowing the constitutional tax limit. So it wouldn't make any sense to go back to property tax increasing the revenue there. So we've really got to look to the sales tax and making sure we can get and collect every dollar that we can. I'll turn this back to Angela.
Just to add one point and kind of circle back around on your revenue before we switch over. Your 2 biggest sources of revenue being real estate taxes and sales tax revenue. You also we should be mindful that for all of our tax exempt entities inside the city, they have usually come also with a sales tax exemption. So that makes that extra 0.5% of that home rule even more important to the city on a going forward basis.
That's a very good point.
Would you repeat that, please?
So when you have a not-for-profit or tax exempt entity, Sales tax is a destination tax, if you will. So you pay tax on goods that are delivered into the city. So a lot of not-for-profits do not, and tax-exempt entities do not pay sales tax. So big part of your footprint in the city. Additional major sources of revenue that we have, we've talked about the New York State Aid and Incentive to Municipalities, your AIM money. The water and sewer funds, we've covered that. We also talked about that in the budget season. And just to kind of show you the fluctuation of the CHIPS program, we've outlined what the 2021 revenue was, $775,000 versus the 2020 revenue of $369,000. And then we also have New York State grants. So turning the page to the Financial Restructuring Board grants, just to draw your attention to, we've been operating in 2021, 2020 in part, and also going forward into 2022 off the FRB grants. And so just to quantify for you, the total FRB grants in that 3-year time frame that we're expecting is $2,405,000. So all of that is a one-time kind of shot in the arm, if you will. And I've outlined there the 5 grants that we are working off. The property transfer grant still has some money available, as does the vehicle leases that we will hopefully bring into the 2022 year, as well as a communications grant. The workforce incentive grant was 100% in your 2021 numbers. And the fire truck grant, as we know, is up and coming as well. So
Could you explain the, I'm sorry, Angela, could you explain the workforce and incentives, the 550K? And
sure.
where it went?
Sure. That money went all for the change in the fire department personnel. So as fire personnel changed in the 2020-2021 year, a lot of the retirees received incentives, and that was fully reimbursed with a small difference from the FRB.
Were those equal in measure as far as the, let's call them buyouts, I guess, you know, they were retirement buyouts, right? Were they all equal, or were they vary in difference? They vary in amounts, I should say.
They did vary in amounts, yes.
We get a breakdown of those?
Does anybody else get an incentive to retire? Any other employees? For example, codes. I know the code man retired. He was looking for an incentive.
No, the code department, in my opinion, didn't require. We used the buyouts to reach workforce, reshaping agreements that we were after. So to answer your first question, to anybody else, the only other buyouts in the city were the police chief, and 2 positions between water and sewer, and all those were intended to reach numbers that we were getting to. Water and sewer was to be able to buy out the senior employees so that we could create the consolidated water sewer job descriptions that we were after between both departments, so we could get down to the least number of people to operate the water sewer plant combined.
Angela, if I may, can I jump back to, I couldn't unmute fast enough. If I can go back to the sales tax revenue aspect and the potential decrease for 2022, obviously with the city taking in its own sales tax going forward. I believe a lot of that, some of the increases from 2020 to 2021, and even in 2019, maybe a lot of that was driven by online purchasing, correct? Is that a safe assumption?
I think, Counselor, that's part of the assumption, being under, COVID at home stay orders. Individuals spent a lot more money online. There's certainly a rise in cost of consumer goods that are taxable as well as we get to the end of 2021, that all of those are contributing factors, yes.
And while not good for us on the consumer end, and certainly the rise in inflation driving prices up obviously creates more sales tax. So I think there's been a couple contributing factors over the last 6 to 18 months that have pushed that number up high.
And the other consideration in all of that is if you think back to where we were in, I'm trying to go by the dates, 2020, 2021, the amount of government stimulus money that went into our economies via additional unemployment benefits, businesses having PPP money that they have to keep people employed. There's been so much COVID relief pumped into our economies that I think that we have possibly, to speculate, have been awarded some spending that may not have otherwise occurred had we not had this money pumped into our economies. So it's all of that kind of created a perfect storm in the sales tax world that we have benefited from.
Right. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So moving ahead to the slide titled General Fund Expense Summary, what we've put together here is just a high-level overview of, at the end of 2021, what percentage of money in the general fund went to categorically 4 departments. So the general support services was 14%, $2 million. The public works was 19%. All other expenses was 9%, and your largest department was public safety. So your public safety expenditures were 58% of your total general fund budget and your total spending. The public safety is comprised of 4 departments: police, fire, code, and animal control, which really isn't, that big of an expense in comparison to your 2 largest, police and fire. So the next page, just to start talking a little bit about the debt obligations of the city. Some good things to point out in 2021. In April, our bond rating was upgraded to non-investment grade bonds to investment grade bonds. So that's a positive marker for the city. We don't know what 2022 will bring. If Moody's does another look at the city, certainly our financials are sitting in a good position to expect or anticipate an additional upgrade there, but that's their decision, not ours. We had $5 million of debt coming into the year. We reduced that to a net amount of 4.35, which is a net reduction of 13%. We did issue a ban in the amount of $415,000 roughly. So that's why that's a net. We paid off some, but we added for the Ready project in 2021 as well. We had 2 capital leases for equipment used by DPW. Those were set to be paid off in 2023, and those were paid off early. We were able to take some of that CHIPS money that you saw the big increase in and use that to our advantage to get rid of some debt in that fashion. Also, the $825,000 of delinquent taxes spanning from 2003 until 2019, that we have paid 50% of that roughly back to the county, all in 2021, with the rest of that will be paid back in 2022. So looking at our existing debt obligations, as I stated, we ended the year with probably, let me go back, about a little over $4 million of bonds outstanding. I've broken these out by fund to kind of give you what fund is responsible for how much of those debts. We tend to see, 2019 bond, X amount of dollars outstanding, but each fund is paying a little piece of that. I want to be very clear that this future payment schedule does not include any debt associated with the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. So this is just existing debt coming into the 2022 year. And so we can see where we were in 2019, and each fund is steadily decreasing. Had we included the sewer debt, we would have had a different chart. But I do want to be very clear that the sewer debt that we are anticipating is not in this chart. So taking that chart and giving you a 5-year repayment of debt by fund, we can see in 2022 and 2023, our debt service amounts exceed $1 million. 2022, we're expecting to pay back 1.1 million, and in 2023, 1.5 million. The biggest contributors to when we see the numbers go from in 2023 from 1.5 million down to 320, we have a ban in the capital project that currently has 1.16 million outstanding. And then in the 2023 year, that $415,000 ban that we did for the Ready project will also be due. We're actually in the process of renewing that right now. And then in 2023, that will need to be repaid. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
As I said earlier, we'll schedule another one of these briefs where we'll break out even further the debt, so we can lay out for council exactly where it is, what they were for. Some of the bonds aren't straightforward, like for one project, there were multiple projects. Some we've rolled over, et cetera. So I want council to have a thorough understanding. The debt picture is certainly looking good. We're going in the right direction with it. As Angela stated, though, we'll be working through this year to close out the sewer project and then determine what the final balance will be and what impact that will be to the sewer fund. But I think it's the reason we've given you that chart is we start talking about the things we didn't talk about in the annual operating budget, which are potential capital improvements. I just want council to be mindful of what the debt payments will look like every year. One of the things we want to try to break out in future budgets is clearly deliberate decisions for daily operating expenses, debt repayment, and capital. And now that our financial situation is improving to the point we're able to do that, I think it'll be easier each year at budget time to break those out. We didn't talk extensively during the budget about capital just for this very reason. There was no money in the planned levy to be able to put towards capital. Now, again, council will be able to make some capital decisions going forward, and we'll have the entire list to council for the the second meeting in March, with recommendations on the top 4 or 5 projects, as well as we're already talking about Ready, and things like that. And again, we're gonna ban for those projects, but again, trying to put together some projections on how much the city might just pay off versus ultimately bond for in the long run. So I think, again, keeping an eye on that, the debt picture is important. So I just wanted to overview here, so there's no no mistake about where we are with the personnel. From 2016 to 2022, it's a pretty significant drop, 40 positions. So, there's been a lot of tough decisions made in this area of personnel. But I think if history of the last 5-6 years shows us anything, when you have to make reductions of the magnitude that we've had to make now to meet the revenues, you're not going to get it by cutting the supply side and the operating side of the budget. The most significant money is in the personnel cost. Again, as I said before, it's not about wanting less of anything. Less fire, less police, less DPW, less city staff. It's not about wanting less of anything. It's about what can we afford. So I think this gives council, like, again, the breakout of the numbers. It shows where we've gone to, and these are the numbers we're going to have to be prepared to sustain operations with for the next several years. We're going to show in some projection charts coming up, what our revenues look like versus what our expenses are, and you're going to see that the significant amount of increases due to the personnel cost are what the revenue is not going to match. One of the most startling numbers that we looked at is when we went back to just to 2019 at 129 positions to getting down to the 2021 number. Our savings is like 800,000 or something. It's nowhere near what you would have thought it was, because the cost is rising so much every year on the numbers that we have, and we'd almost be required to cut personnel each year to maintain that. So figuring out, again, how to increase the revenue and how to be as efficient as we possibly can with our workforce numbers. The next slide's the one I guess I'm alluding to here, which is a rough mechanism of how to demonstrate to council. This is the projection of where we are today. So you see 2022, our revenues and our expenses match up. Obviously, we have a balanced budget. But then moving over to 23, you can see already if our revenue remains flat or dips just a little bit based on potential for sales tax to dip, the dotted blue chart shows where our expenses are going to be with just the assumptions of the increases in salaries, healthcare, and the other things related to that. And I would say these are very, very conservative. There's no significant increased numbers put on here. These are just, using very nominal marginal increases in our expenses. But you can see again, if the revenue's staying flat, this is our problem. And you see this going right up through the chart. Each year we maintain that gap, $600, $700, $1,000, approaching $1 million in gap in our revenue versus our expenses. So I think, of all the things we talk about, getting through each year is a challenge. I think we've got to begin to look at, what's going to be happening in the out years. Where are we going? So it's why I think that debt chart is important. So we're planning for all those things. We're listing out our capital, but again, how will we close the gap that we have each year? And I just don't think it's smart management to continue to just try to budget 1 year at a time. We've got to start to put some things in place where these two lines come closer together. I don't think it matters what logic line you use. I think everybody has good input on this. Again, for a lot of the distraction that we get with people being critical of personnel cuts, again, there's nobody here that wants to see anything cut. The question becomes, how do we get these two graphs together? We don't want to leave the next council, the council after that, in a worse position. Any questions before we keep moving? So I've come to the recommendations. This is not to be confused with the priority list, the strategic plan document that we're preparing for council. These are just really some very high level recommendations that I'm making to council that I think are necessary for us to address the challenges that are most pressing in front of us. Property tax relief, continue to provide property tax rate relief in the form of tax cuts and require a supermajority to approve total tax levy increase above 1% for any fiscal year. We just, we've got to hold the line with that property tax. We're not going to have the option for the next couple of years, but once we do, and certainly we know property values have been in the last 18 months to 20 months have gone up in Ogdensburg. We're seeing significant real estate sales and increases in property values. So we know that the assessable value will go up. But I think we've really got to resist the temptation to take advantage of that. We've got to try to find a way to work within the reasonable means. Home rule legislation. I'd like to have council's definitive decision on this and where we're going and who's going to lead this, this initiative this year. Again, as you look at the potential for less property tax revenue, you again know that sales tax is where we've got to go with this. And the law doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility in this area, but being able to harness that additional full 1% that is born right here in Ogdensburg is going to be critical for the city's survival. I don't believe that this should be a hard sell with our legislative representatives. I think tonight we've shown all the stats, the figures are there, where our revenues are going, where our expenses are. We need this money, or we need a different source of revenue. Again, property tax, we just can't continue to hit the 44% of the properties we can for all the burden. It's just too much. We've got to find a different way to do this. So I hope in the next couple meetings, council can get definitive on our plan, communicating to our elected officials what we want, and it really needs to be an elected official that champions this. Economic development zone, establish a state-funded, city-controlled economic development zone at the former St. Lawrence Psychiatric Center and Augsburg Correctional Facility properties. It's enough that the state is closing these facilities. It's enough that they've left the property sitting there. It's really time for definitive action. Ogdensburg has got to attack this issue with Albany, really like our future depends on it. Again, 56% of the properties and a good bulk of it that we'll show you is the state property, a lot of it very prime real estate on the St. Lawrence River. But again, this needs to be championed by an elected official with other elected officials, and everybody, from the city government to the county government together, working to get the state to see that we've got to take action. It's not benefiting the state having that property sitting there. There's no reason that they're just leaving that. And if their decision is final on the prison, then what is the next phase? So again, these to me are just big ones. They're not going to be easy to crack, but we've really got to have some unified representation.
Why would we stop at just that property? The whole city should be an economic development zone with some serious state incentives, very serious. And maybe there needs to be a bill put into place at the state level that when a certain percentage of property is off the tax rolls, then the state needs to kick in with some serious incentives for an economic development zone.
Yeah, I don't, no question, Counselor. I don't think there's any question about that. I think we start, I'm just proposing again, we start with the ones that are that St. Lawrence Psychiatric Center has been, largely abandoned for years, just sitting there. Now it's it's becoming a blight on your city. We're chasing down properties in the city, equally as bad a shape, and the state of New York is leading the way with blighted property with no plan for doing anything. So, only after, us appealing and talking this issue, now they're going to put up safety fencing to keep people from getting hurt, which isn't really what we were looking for. But yeah, yes, sir. I think this needs to be an initiative with City Council, with our Assembly and our state, Senator. And again, perhaps other assemblymen and senators from the area. This, the issues, as we all know, in Ogdensburg really impact this region. So it shouldn't just be seen as limited to this area. What happens in Ogdensburg impacts issues in Franklin County and Jefferson County, and I think we should be looking, for everyone to be supporting these things. And they have similar issues. Ogdensburg Bridge and Port Authority seats. It appears to me at one time the city council had representation on that board. I don't know where it may have been lost. Maybe it was just something that was done, but I really think now there needs to be something addressed by the governor to ensure that the city is represented. Again, another significant organization, ultimately state controlled, with a lot of land, a lot of property, and a lot of decisions making that impact the city. And I don't see how we don't have somebody from the city council representing us there. This airport matter is starting to become very, seemingly complex, but without understanding the board's philosophy, why we're not looking at the airline that's established up the road and doing well with a business model that's working. Understanding that certainly a lot of money has been put in the facility to handle larger planes, but if the larger plane industry isn't able to work there, I don't know why we would continue pursuing that. But again, without having somebody on that board and understanding what the philosophy is, and looking out for the interest of the city, I don't think that we're going to be able to get what we need out of that. And I don't think we can afford to have one more state, level entity operating within the city that we're not a much closer part of. City Council Liaison, we've talked about this several times. I just think that it's time council put this into action. There needs to be somebody from this council that provides some level of liaison with each state and federal elected official. We've got to put a better political machine together. We can't do this on the resources that we generate just here in Ogdensburg. We can't do it. The county's sitting on $20.9 million of American Rescue Act funds. We got $1 million. $20.9 million, not a dollar of it's been committed, and there's not a plan where it's going to go. Somebody from the city of Ogdensburg needs to be championing what portion of that $20.9 million needs to go for issues and concerns and projects and the citizens of this community, just as one topic. We've been working the 911 topic for a couple of years now. It's probably 2 or 3 before that it's been talked about. These are just things that we have got to have somebody communicating closer at each level of government so they understand what occurs. When we go to write legislation or we go to push legislation, as Councilor Scamperly just discussed, these are things that require hours of coordination and discussion and proper wording, and then mounting a proper political campaign to get these things through. We saw the difficulty we had with a Republican assembly person trying to work through a democratically controlled state legislature. It's difficult, but we can't stop because a certain party is in control. We've got to create a better situation. And again, these are all things that I think elected officials need to represent the city. Just spoke of the county collaborations. Can move on through that one. Board of Education, again, Councilor Reish, myself, Fisher, and Kennedy went to one meeting to discuss the SRO, but it was obvious to me sitting in that meeting that there's many topics that the city council and the city school board should be discussing jointly, some behind closed doors, so that we all understand we are taking from the same taxpayers. Our source of money is the same, and our priorities can't always be competing, and it can't be looked at singularly. Again, I know that won't sit well with some people. Now you want to tell the school board what to do. No, we just have to understand we're all taking from the same pot of money, and there has to be some balance between who's getting what share of the money. I'd be remiss if we didn't again talk about some form in our public safety. As you saw tonight, 58% of our city expenditures, is that right? 58% of our city expenditures going towards public safety. It doesn't leave enough for the rest of the community operations. It isn't, again, about wanting less fire department or wanting less police department. It's that we have to run every other operation in the city. And so that cost is not going down. The salaries are not going down. The benefit costs are not going down. The retirement costs are not going down. The cost of doing the business, you see $950,000 and we got a decent deal. That truck could have easily been well over $1 million. That's the cost of these businesses. And we've got to be searching for the most efficient way to do it. I don't see any time in the near future, the near history, where the Ogdensburg Fire Department is completely volunteer. It doesn't line up with the national trends. It doesn't line up with the history of the city not having generations of people volunteering. But what also doesn't line up is our ability to continue to pay. If last year the average cost of a firefighter is $130,000, this year it's $152,000, next year it's $168,000, and so on and so on and so forth. Again, our revenue is just not climbing fast enough to be able to do that. We're going to have to look at a model that provides some level of support. And from my perspective, the paid on call model works best for that, to cover, and assist with those contingencies and larger operations while we effectively, find the staffing level that works best for the day-to-day operations. This isn't anything that's going to happen this year. It's not going to happen next year. But if we don't start talking about it and laying the groundwork now, we won't have made any change in 5 or 7 or 10 years. We've got to start doing something now before the finances of this puts us under, and then what? Then we leave the city with nothing. So the idea that there'll always be money is only an idea from people that want to believe that, instead of people that want to look at the numbers. Same with local law enforcement. This isn't, again, not about one in our own police department. It's looking at all the options that are out there, locally, regionally, state level, and figuring out what model makes the most sense, what model becomes the most affordable for the city and for the area. I don't know that there is any one model that comes out of this, but I think it is time that the county, the sheriff in particular, lead an effort to determine, are we providing local law enforcement in the most efficient means possible, or are we still condoning some level of duplicative services, duplicative positions, that money could be used to put more ground officers on the street. It was interesting to me that a couple of the county legislators and the county treasurer, when they were graciously giving us back some of our sales tax money, decided to indicate that we have a lower than required level of public servants doing public safety. We have as many people on the road covering the city of Ogdensburg and the police department most days as the sheriff does, covering the entire county. So this isn't a problem that is just germane to Ogdensburg. It's a problem that is encompassing all of us. And I think having all the entities together, coming up with the most efficient means of doing this service without the level of guarding parochial interest, it has to occur. likely talking about the fire department or the police department doesn't make any sense if we're not also willing to talk about the form of government. Is it time for city council to empower the manager to study and look at the benefits, the detriments of maintaining a city form of government, or is it time to look at potentially the benefits of requesting to move to a town form of government? Again, these aren't things that will happen this year, next year, the year after, but they're things that if we don't study, if we don't look at the benefits and determine, what is best for the future, we won't get there. We'll find ourselves at the edge of a cliff trying to make an immediate decision to fix the problem that has been in front of us for 20 plus years. And I think, again, it is time under the umbrella of all this that we look at the entire local government model and determine how best to serve the community and how best to serve the tax dollars that we have. That concludes overall our brief. The financial report that you were given is obviously much more detailed in the format that you expect every year. If there are questions, please send them to us. This is all number stuff. There's no spin here. There's no side story. There's nothing but the numbers. We will start the financial audit process. So as always, our numbers will be verified by our auditor, and we hope to have that done in the June-July timeframe again, so it's finished and closed out before we start the budget process for the coming year.
No, I'd just like to say the financial report looks great and the presentation is also great. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
When will we be looking at the potential, I'm sure this, the closing of the books for 2021 has been sent to the independent auditors. Will we be looking at an April or a June presentation?
Counselor, we're hoping for a June, July presentation, same as last year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We have one public hearing tonight. It is regarding an ordinance to amend Chapter 203 and 203-1 of the Ogdensburg Municipal Code entitled Liveries, Limos, and Taxi Cabs. It is going to be bill number 16, and I will open that up to public hearing now. If you're attending remotely, use the raise hand feature.
I do not see any hands raised.
I'll declare this public hearing closed. And this brings us to public appearance. At this time, anyone attending remotely would like to address council, please use the raise hand feature and you'll have 5 minutes.
I do not see any hands raised.
And this brings us to correspondence. We have a correspondence.
We received the preemption notice from the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, and a copy of which was attached to the agenda, Mayor.
Thank you. Next, we have our consent agenda that the claims is enumerated in general fund warrant number 04-2022, the amount of $600,233.51, and library warrant number 04-2022, the amount of $0, and capital fund warrant number 04-2022, the amount of $50,363, and community development fund warrant number 04-2022, the amount of $75.98, and community renewal fund warrant number 04-2022, the amount of $0. As audited, fee and the same hereby are ordered paid. I so move.
I'll second it.
Kathy, would you please call it?
Mayor Skelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dilaba?
Yes.
Counselor Fisher?
Yes.
Counselor Powers?
Yes.
Counselor Reish? Counselor Reish, it appears you are self-muted.
He may be going by that state rule, maybe he's talking about that.
you like me to move on, Mayor?
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly?
Yes.
Approved.
We do not have any appointments tonight, and this brings us to items for council action. Our first item of business will be read by Police Chief Mark Burns.
An ordinance to amend Chapter 203, Section 203-1 of the Ogdensburg Municipal Code. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Ogdensburg, New York as follows. Item 1, that Chapter 203 entitled Liveries, Limos, and Taxicabs, Section 203-1 entitled Definitions is hereby amended as follows. Livery will be added to livery, limo, and taxicab. Includes any motor vehicle engaged in the business of or at any time used to carry persons for hire, except vehicles subject to the provisions of the Transportation Corporation's law. Item 2, the ordinance shall take effect 10 days after publication of notice, which shall give the title and describe same in summary form.
Thank you, Chief. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
We need someone to introduce it, and
I'll introduce that.
Second it.
thank you.
Thanks for that. Got it myself. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Counselor Scamperly?
Yes.
Mayor Skelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dilaba?
Yes.
Counselor Fisher?
Yes.
Counselor Powers?
Yes.
Counselor Reish?
He's probably staying. Thank you.
Approved.
Our next item of business will be read by City Comptroller Angela Gray.
This is a resolution to disperse an additional portion of the American Rescue Plan Act funding to nonprofit organizations and small businesses. Whereas the City of Ogdensburg was awarded an American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund allocation in the amount of $1,068,179.88. Whereas $535,177.88 was received in the 2021 fiscal year. And whereas these funds are to be used to mitigate the economic fallout of the coronavirus pandemic and to support communities and populations impacted by the pandemic. And whereas City Council previously awarded the allocation of a portion of the funding to nonprofit organizations and small businesses. And whereas the availability of funding was publicized and applications were received and reviewed by staff. And whereas funds totaling $131,000 were previously dispersed to nonprofit organizations and small businesses. And whereas City Council previously approved the allocation of $100,000 to the general fund to be used by the city for lost revenues in the years 2020 and 2021. And whereas the remaining balance of the city's first allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act funding is $304,177.88. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Comptroller is authorized to disperse $5,000 to nonprofit organizations and $12,500 to small businesses in the total additional amount of $17,500 as designated on the attached spreadsheet.
I'll move that.
I'll second that. I just have one thing. In speaking to the Seaway Festival, we do have an opportunity, if we were able to increase the money to them, of putting on an equal fireworks after the Christmas parade in November. I don't know if anyone on council would like that idea or not, but I thought it would be really something to have two fireworks. You know, the Christmas parade is a big hit, and then to have the fireworks after it, I thought it would be beneficial to the residents.
It's so, I'd support that. It's my understanding that they want to do more than that even. They want to do games, they want to do activities, things like that. They want to make sure there's going to be more happening at the Seaway Festival as well as the Christmas parade. Do they have a proposal, like a written one?
All I have is the additional fireworks in November after the parade.
I think it's something we can definitely vote on in the future myself. I think that they should put something on paper for us.
Well, they did do legwork on the fireworks, and they have a firm price on it.
Well, good.
One of the things, though, is, to get this reduced price,
I gotta do
they
it.
really need to move ahead now and commit. So I don't know if you want to act on that.
I think we have the money, and Andrea and I can talk about the budget lines. I think the fireworks aren't an issue. I think I'll let them know we can commit to that. If council doesn't have any objection, but I agree with Councilor Scampley, though. I don't want to piecemeal all year long. I'd like them to put together what we're going to do. The recreation department, planning recreation group has got some expanded ideas for the city's activities around Christmas time as well. So I think getting all those together and getting a plan and coming to council that way, once we have a dollar figure, then Angela and I can figure out, through the current budget, how we potentially attack that. So I think probably as best as between Andrea and Mackenzie, we let them liaison with them and put the master plan together and then come back to us.
I'll support that, definitely.
And the fire, I don't know if the fireworks are something we can handle within the discussion of the existing budget. That's not an issue.
Wonderful. This is going to be a great year. Thank you. So we have a second, and Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Skelly?
I have a couple of questions here. Seventh, whereas down to allocate $100,000 to the general fund to be used for city for lost revenues in years 20 and 21. With the recent report that we just got and the additional revenues with that, I have two-pronged question here. One, that 100% would probably, or 100,000 would probably go a long way in future events for a Seaway Festival. And more importantly, are we responsible in paying that back with ARPA money to be used to balance any aspect of the budget through lost revenues?
So, Councilor, that 100,000 was last year. We allocated that last year in this first round. The resolution was just intended to give you the recap of where the money has already gone to, and then what we're proposing to put on it now. So this isn't new. This is something that you already approved, the 100,000 to come out of that first 500,000 to go for the lost revenues that we showed council on each of the line items that we did. We can resend you that, but that was a pass.
Well, I can see the year 2020, but my concern is we've got 2021 in here as well. And, with recognizing that you offset some of it from the year before, we're still using, what aspect of that 100K are we using in 2021 as the resolution reads?
Yeah, so again, when the lost revenue we showed you was covering both years. It was lost revenue in 2020 and lost revenue in 2021. And then the second amount that we would potentially be giving we'll cover that then. We've got the second amount planned in the operating budget already for this year. How we use it, what we end up using it for, will depend on what our sales tax revenue looks like. But again, that 100 was for the lost revenue in 2020 and the lost revenue in 2021.
Are we responsible in having to pay back?
No, sir. Pay it back to the federal government, you mean?
Yes.
No, Angela can tell you that our calculation made us eligible to use. We could have used the entire appropriation to offset losses and city expenses when the final regs were posted. I'll let her talk a little more.
When we discussed this back in the summertime, we were dealing up interim regulations. They were not yet final. And so within those regs, there was this pretty extensive calculation that you had to do with your department revenue over a certain time frame. And at that point in time, we identified revenues where we had a shortfall, and we were eligible to keep a lot more than $50,000 per year. The reason why we have 2020 and 2021 in there is because that's what the legislation allowed from the start of the pandemic in 2020. The money didn't come available until mid-year 2021, so we bring both years into the 2021 year. Just recently, well, go ahead, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So just recently, the final regs came out, and they did away with that calculation, and they allowed for municipalities to keep a standard amount of $10 million or less without doing the lost revenue calculation. So what that means to the city of Ogdensburg in our $1,070,000 allocation, we can actually keep the entire amount under final regs should council choose to do that. It's not the decision council has made, but certainly we are eligible to keep way more than the 100,000. And there is no need of repayment of that.
Very good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Skelly,
Yes.
Counselor Dilaba,
Yes.
Counselor Fisher,
Yes.
Counselor Powers.
Yes.
Mayor, it appears that Counselor Reish has lost his connection, so I'll just move forward.
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
approved.
Our next item of business will be read by the City Comptroller, Angela Gray.
This is a resolution to transfer funds to balance the 2021 budget, whereas Section C65 of the Ogdensburg City Charter permits the transfer of an unencumbered balance in an appropriation made for one department or agency to another department or agency, or the transfer of any unencumbered balance in an appropriation made for a division or office to another division or office in the same department upon written request of the city manager. And now therefore be it resolved that the city manager is hereby authorized to make the following budget adjustments to the 2021 budget. This is a 2-page resolution that details the various departments of which we would be moving money out of, moving money into, with a net amount being moved over to the contingency line.
I'll move this.
I'll second it.
So can we get an explanation of what's happening? I see the adjustments. It says over, under, for example, if you start the first one, city manager, 56,988. That's under budget.
That is correct.
So we're adding money.
We're taking money out of that budget. So the city manager, good example, that budget was under budget 56,988. So we're moving money out of that budget, which will give you, and it's not math that goes across the line. So that might be what's a little bit confusing. You have to look at your adopted budget.
Right.
With that adjustment would give you the modified budget. And so when we take 56, call it 57,000 out of there, we'd have a modified budget number of 183,000.
So what's that 56,900?
We had budgeted for an additional position within the city manager back in 2021 that was not utilized.
Is that a secretary?
Yes.
So if we go down through here, police, is that in addition as well?
That is that the police was underspent by their budget allotment. So if I'm just kind of rough mapping this, their original budget would be $3.9 million. They spent 3.8. So we would be moving out the underspent money.
118,000?
Correct.
A good bit of that was an unfilled position that we could hire for.
Can we hire another police officer with that position, with that money? That's enough money, right?
It would be, but excuse me. So
I'd like to move that out of there and leave that for the police department. I think they're seriously understaffed. You know, and I know we had the big conversation in the presentation earlier. We're down to 21, and I think that's probably how many active right now? 15?
it would really be a different action. I mean, this is our 2021 closeout. So what I asked Angela to do to make everything clear was we took every budget line that had a surplus, and you're seeing that here. So you could see every budget line, pull all the surpluses out so that they're set aside. And then the next page is all the areas that we need to put money back into that were over budget. So this will balance out the 2021 budget. That 2.1 million surplus that we talked about earlier in the brief, again, a portion of that is the surplus that's coming from this budget. $1 million roughly in sales tax, about 500 in grant money, and then the other unexpended lines in our budget. So that's what increases your fund balance. If council wanted to modify the 2022 budget utilizing funds from the fund balance to increase, any line in the 2022 budget, that's certainly, within their ability to do it. But this resolution is simply to close our 2020. Yeah, in previous years, you've had a resolution that just said, let the city manager balance the budget. The charter requires a little bit more than that, so I'm giving you specifically what.
You're doing it properly.
We want the accounting to be there. We want to show that we pulled all the money from the lines that didn't need it, and then we put it back into the lines that did.
So we're putting $1.6 million into a contingency budget. And you're saying that if council wanted to add another police officer, we could make an adjustment to take money from the contingency
No,
to do that?
no. I'm saying this is closing out this is your 2021 contingency. You're going to close this budget. It's over with. These are just the numbers to balance the books to close it. I've already told you tonight that your fund balance is being increased by $2.1 million, a portion of which comes from the surplus that was in the operating budget. So again, it's a separate action. If council tells me tonight, hire more cops, more firemen, more DPW workers, I will say to you, where do you want me to get the money from to do that? You could say to me, take it from the fund balance, but that would be modifying the 2022 budget.
There's other issues too, Dan, that, we need a sewage pump station.
I know.
800,000, we just
I
put a
know.
lot of money into the ready. We really need a roof on here in this building, Let's just.
So I was under the impression when we looked at this, that this was taking from the budget that we just passed.
Oh,
Let's
no,
clarify
this is our
that this is
2021
2021.
Yeah,
figures.
this is making the books right. So our overall budget was surplus by $2.1 million, but we did have, we had the lines you see on the second page that were over their budget. So we're moving some of the money from the over lines to the underlines, if you will. It just lets us keep our accounting straight. The net result for the year is 2.1 million surplus from the 2021 operating budget.
Kathy, would you please follow the roll?
Well, hang on. While I appreciate the balancing of the books, until I get an opportunity to take a look at the original budget and compare the numbers, I'm not going to support this until then.
I can forward that.
Kathy, would you please follow the roll?
Counselor Dilaba?
Yes.
Counselor Fisher? Counselor Fisher, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Powers?
No.
Counselor Scamperly?
No.
Mayor Skelly?
Yes.
Defeated.
That's amazing. You vote against hiring a lawyer and you vote against balancing the budget. Okay, our next item of business will be read by Counselor, well, I guess it won't be. Does anybody else have it to read?
Mayor, I apologize. I was wrong. That is approved. No. Need 4 votes, sir. Counselor Reish lost his connection and he is no longer present. Counselor Kennedy is not present. So therefore you still require 4 votes. I just want to clarify for the record. The vote was 3-2, but 4 votes are required for it to pass.
Correct.
Okay? I just wanted to
Should
clarify.
have just tabled it so we can look
Thank
at
you.
it.
Should have just voted to balance it. So, okay. So, are we going to skip
Mike?
this next?
Mike, can I have a second? Does, Kathy, is there anything in the charter that necessitates the need for this resolution? Doesn't the city manager just balance the book?
So that's something I would have to research.
Would you please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I believe it is in there.
The resolution itself references section C65, but I haven't had the opportunity to review that. So I will certainly do that.
Thank you.
Money's there, it's in one place, not in another, doesn't matter. We'll leave the books messy. Previous counselors have They like the books messy, so usually leave it
Move
like
on
that.
with the agenda, Mayor. Move on with the agenda. We all have opinions. You know, I'm not gonna sit here and get into a war of words. That's my vote. I stand by my vote. Carry on with the agenda.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm taking orders from you, Counselor Powers.
Also, Mike, excuse me, Your Honor.
Simply just a
Your Honor,
point of
Your
order.
Honor, could I speak for a second?
Meetings are to be conducted.
Your Honor, may I have the floor, please?
Yes, Chief.
Okay, I suggest that the council that's sitting up there right now, please review your rules and regulations and the charter to where it says how you will address and how you will speak at a council meeting. You will ask to be spoken. I'm reading it right now. So please don't interrupt the mayor when he's speaking.
Thank you, Steve. That's a good point, Counselor Powers. So we're gonna skip item 4. We're gonna go to old business. And this brings us to old business, and we will begin with City Manager Stephen Jelly.
I'm happy to read the next resolution. I don't, it was asked for by Councilor Reach, but there's nothing inappropriate for someone else to read it. A resolution requesting the endorsement and support of Senator Charles Schumer, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Congresswoman Liz Stefanik for the 3 grants submitted by the City of Ogdensburg to the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Whereas the Federal Emergency Management Agency provides grant funding opportunities for municipalities across the United States, whereas the City of Ogdensburg has applied for 3 grants from FEMA this year as follows: 2021 staffing for adequate fire and emergency response SAFER, $1.34 million, 2021 assistance to fires grant, $36,000, 2021 fire prevention and safety grant, $49,000. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Ogdensburg Council requests the endorsement and support of Senator Charles Schumer, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and Congresswoman Liz Stefanik for our 3 grant applications, and be it further resolved that copies of this resolution will be forwarded to each.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
I got a question. So these grants, they're written by Mr. McCarthy? Pretty much?
Mr. McCarthy assisted myself and other members of staff, right?
What is his position or title now? Exactly.
He's working on a interim temporary basis as assistant to administrative assistant.
Administrative assistant. Is that a civil service position or a union position or anything like that?
No.
It's just an
At will
employee.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Bill, you seconded that, did you?
Yeah.
I'm done with my questions.
We have some background, gentlemen. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Counselor Fisher,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Mayor Skelly.
Just, I'd just like to say that after, if we are successful getting this grant, that after the 3 years that it's paid for, we will not be able to afford this, the extra firemen for long. And we'll probably put ourselves back in the position that we were in 2023, no longer being able to pay our bills. And I predict that will be probably by 2030, just possibly sooner. So I'm voting no.
Counselor Dilaba,
Yes.
approved.
And this brings us to old business, and we will begin with City Manager Steve Jelly.
So as we covered in the brief, I just, if we could have some group communication, whether it's via email or schedule a workshop, I just think we need to make some very definitive decisions and an action plan of how we are going to get the home rule legislation through the State Assembly and Senate this year. It's early in the legislative season and session, but again, these things take a lot of time to put together. We are competing in an election year, so it's just another facet and factor of getting these pushed through. So I think it really would be my highest recommendation to council right now. This becomes your highest priority in how are you going to organize and put together the legislative campaign that we need. Staff is certainly, available and ready to support. We've done lots of research, have lots of information for the last couple of years. We have a really good law firm in which to work with and draw from. I've got them working on some draft legislation now. But again, it's not going to happen by writing a bill, you all putting a resolution on it and sending it forward to the assemblyman to pass. It's not going to happen that way. So we need to get full force on this, or we need to just not do anything. But we shouldn't do a half effort and waste our time. It'll result in a half effort. So I'm asking for council to determine how you're going to put this together, who's going to lead it, and how are we going to push it through. And then what do you want to ask for? I mean, I don't think there's right now, I just haven't heard council's definitive decision on what they, want to seek, 0.5% or the whole percent. I mean, again, I think the math should dictate that, but certainly there may be other factors that you want to consider. And I think there may be a shorter route as well. Maybe this is something that can be further worked out with the county and save our state elected officials trying to muscle something through a legislative majority that is not friendly to our representatives. So I just think there's got to be a brainstorming session and an action plan put together of how we're going to do this. And I don't know of any other higher priority right now. Without this right now, a lot of other things that you want to work on don't come to fruition, and they just don't matter. This is revenue, and we need to do it.
So I think we need to start with the piece of legislation that we're talking about. If you got a lawyer working on it, then let's look at that. Okay. Talk about it. And then work with the county a little bit. If they said they're going to support us for home rule legislation, we'll see if they're going to or not. Okay. And then we should move forward, make changes to the legislation if that's what we decide on or whatever, and then push our representatives. Just my 2 cents. Okay. But let's start with that.
I'll try to have that well before the next council meeting for everyone to look at. I'll send it as soon as we get it. I've asked them to draft at least the body of the language it should look like, and then we'll fill in the blanks which specifically we want to say. So we are working that.
I believe there's a consensus that we want the full 1 cent, and we definitely do need it. Next, Steve.
So we'll be broadcasting starting tomorrow the City Hall opening. We're going to go to Monday through Thursday. City Hall open. We're going to remain closed on the Fridays. I'd like to again kind of phase this back in. Two things there. The Friday closures will do a couple things for us. One, it'll allow us the day to do the deeper cleaning and make sure we've cleaned the facility from the 4 previous days that it's open. We also, again, with reduced staff in every areas, there really is a need for a day that staff can just focus on working without answering window calls. So I think opening the 4 days gives the public the Monday through Thursday to get to City Hall to do the business they have to do. And then public meeting attendance, same thing. We'll be modifying the policy to allow for public attendance at all meetings, including city council meetings. My recommendation will be we'll use the half occupancy and mask precautions for at least the month of March, and then just continue to see where the numbers go. Things are still looking positive, throughout the county and the region. We are in the peak period of the time of year that you'd expect things to be spreading. So I feel like we're making the move in the right direction the council wants to make, but I also just want to remain cautious. Getting through the winter months and the shut-in months, I think are really, really important. So we will be announcing all that. And again, everything stays the way it is now. The next city council meeting will be open to the public at 50% capacity of the room. Mask will be required at this point, unless speaking at the podium.
Does anyone else have any old business?
Yes. So, start right off with the city manager. Indicated he was resigning in July. Is there something in writing? We need to move forward, I think, as a council to start the headhunter process, looking for a new city manager, whether it be a firm or a headhunter specifically or something like that. I think this is in writing. And according to at least the contracts that I read. So.
I haven't seen it and I haven't accepted it yet, so.
You haven't seen it or you have?
I haven't seen it and I haven't accepted it, so. I don't accept it, so.
Is there something, Brian? The news agent reporting. Did you get better?
See nothing.
I think this is a topic, that's a personnel topic, whether it involves me or anybody else. If the council wants to discuss a personnel matter, you should appropriately do it in executive.
Steve, your air conditioner's running.
I think we need to move forward with hiring a firm.
Oh, I agree with you. If he's going to resign, we got to,
So
figure out what's going on here.
let's have an executive meeting next
Next one.
meeting and then go from there.
Okay.
Personnel, I don't understand how it can be a personnel issue when it was broadcast in the paper by your own volition. You know, I mean, you announced your attendance, you announced your tendencies then, and you know, that's how council chooses to move forward, then so be it. But where are we in the hunt for a fire chief?
We are waiting for confirmation of the fire chief civil service test list.
So another piece I have is, are you done, Mike, with that one?
Yes, sir.
OBPA. Talking about overcharging them $60,000. They asked for an explanation. Did the city have a meeting with them yet? I see they've reached out several times. Tomorrow? Okay. And then, so was that a mistake, do you think, on city part, or was that just?
No, I want to speak with them to see what their understanding is, but I don't believe we made a mistake. I think there is a continued fundamental misunderstanding about how we're providing the service. You can't, the contract is very clear about what we're charging, how we're charging. The Bridge and Port Authority Council, remember, was given two options: two personnel and the overtime cost to cover outside of when two personnel are required, or pay three personnel and that'll be it. So you have a fixed cost, or one will be floating, potentially saving you some money. They chose the first, potentially saving them some money. It's still saving them some money, but we'll review it again with them and report back to council if there's any disagreement. But I think the contract that we signed is pretty clear, and I think we're operating well within that. So you can't, and I mean, again, just fill the discussion on the process. I mean, you can't staff a system with, you need two people. There's two shifts in which flights happen on typically. So let's say there's two people, one for each shift. Sometimes those people are off, et cetera. They go to training, they take leave, whatever, it takes somebody else to cover. So, but we'll sit with them again. It's been since August or September of 2020 that we spoke last. So I think it's time for a refresher of what we're doing. And certainly understand the Bridge and Port certainly has challenges now with the airport, and we want to meet those. But what is different today that I think continues to drive some confusion is we don't staff the airport with aggregate staffing from the police department. In other words, send one of 3 or 4 cars available. We don't have the staff for that. We specifically hired and maintain personnel to do that function. So it's different than before when we were charging based on if we had somebody that we could spare, if you will, we sent them. It didn't cost them anything versus if we had to hire somebody. So it's just a different way of operating that changed in 2022 based on our our circumstances and how we're funding the positions.
Keep us informed on that, please. So the developer for the Diamond National property, the potential developer who submitted an RFP, had a study done, came up here to have a meeting. He called me up very upset that he didn't show up to the meeting. Can we get an update on what's going on with the Diamond property and this developer?
You can, I would say at this point, it's a contractual matter that's, under negotiation, and it's appropriate to comment in executive session. I had a family emergency that came up. We were well represented by the planning and development director, who this is her area to handle. I'm sorry he was disappointed, but I didn't bring anything to bear to the meeting that Andrea didn't well handle. And we're we're continuing to work with him, and I'll have a report to council was coming next meeting. But if council would like something sooner, I can, we can make that happen.
Okay.
Was there any consideration to reach out to him to let him know of what happened? Were you in town at all that day, by chance?
He said he had a family issue. That's really sufficient. And
I understand that, but I mean,
I don't think he has to explain his family issue.
I'm not saying he does. What I'm saying is a meeting of that magnitude, a courtesy call could have been after the fact, and that's where our concern lies.
Andrea Smith is planning director, and she was there, so we're represented.
So the last thing I have is social media policy. AR Article 14, I get a lot of people sending me this week screenshots, comments being made again by city manager, the mayor. Have you guys looked at this policy since I brought it up in October?
Have you looked at what we respond to? I mean,
I don't really look at it. I'm getting people sending me screenshots.
We've seen you and other counselor and on the secret site and with horrible things said. And we've seen you so come on. Are you really in a position to?
So I think that we need to clarify this policy and all of us abide by it, no matter what.
I bet you and certain people would really like that if we don't have the opportunity to answer lies.
I think there's a way to answer without calling people names and being derogatory.
I don't remember calling anyone a name.
I think personnel here does, okay, by the screenshots that I've seen.
I think he classifies.
And
I've never seen him personally call anyone.
And I think that's obtuse. That's just wrong. You can't say that to citizens.
Well, some of the things that you and another counselor have liked that have been said about us, foul things.
Like?
Come on. Yeah, you like foul things said about people on the council and staff. And he's an employee.
I don't like things about staff, all right, because I know it's improper. And so now public official, I might, but.
On a secret site. And it's really
powerful.
powerful.
A secret site.
At least I do it out in the open. Everything I do is public.
So regardless, there's a policy. I think we need to review it, and I think we need to talk about it, and I think that we need to quit with the Facebook, period.
Well, why don't you get off it first and set things in?
Okay, I've been off it, so. But I think a part of our, if you guys want to have a meeting on this or put it on the agenda, it'll give everybody a chance to review it. It's Article 14, the Internet Technology Policies. And I think everybody should review it. Everybody should have a copy. The next meeting, we have a nice discussion. Moving forward with Facebook or what have you. I mean, people are very upset, and I understand.
I get a lot of positive things on mine.
I mean, I'm sure you do.
People like the good news.
Well, that's good. That's good. I get positive too, but I don't really do the whole politics too much in here. But yeah.
Positive
I think that, name calling is inappropriate, and things like that. We need to settle this down.
I think,
And we need to review and discuss this law and this part of the charter and decide what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. If you want to defend policy, there's a way to defend policy without calling people names.
we
So
should have a policy that, for barroom politics and
there you go.
shenanigans that go on there.
So
You know?
there you go. And you can be a part of that too.
Yeah,
So.
I don't think so. I don't really think they want to hang out with some groups.
I don't think
Feelings mutual, but all that aside, every place of employment has some aspect of a Web 0.20 or any aspect of conduct on social media sites. And I concur with Dan that at some point it needs to get reined in and abide by the actual charter and regulation of employment. I'm not suggesting that everybody isn't guilty to some extent, but at the end of the day, it's something that we need to rein in as a body and continue to perform the functions of the city and do it in a professional and respectful manner.
Well, I think you guys should rein in your group and, stop the lies and harassment. And then we wouldn't have to respond to them. Okay, and this brings us to new business. Does anyone have new business? Does anyone have any items for discussion?
Yes. So, I didn't have a chance to go back and look for this. There was a law brought up not too long ago, and perhaps Andrea or Kathy could find it, about people having a business in their home limited to square footage in certain neighborhoods, things like that, residential. Do you remember that? Back when Sarah was city manager, and it got shot down. Can we take a look at that and revisit it, especially in the sense that we're looking for a sales tax increase? And I think small businesses, Augsburg's got a history of being the mill town, but a non-union mill town. And there was, once that Seaway came, people didn't have a lot of money to throw into bigger businesses. So I'm thinking a good way to jumpstart economic development in this town is for people to be able to try something without having a whole lot of capital investment. And maybe we can increase our sales tax revenue in that avenue. But if we can revisit that law, take a look at it, think about where we want to move, but I think we should try and move forward again with this new council. Because I think it might get support. I remember it got shot down before. I voted for it, but it was a very close call then. And I think it's worth looking at. So I don't remember what year it was. I remember Sean was on the council. And so.
Was it,
Yeah, that's right, it was.
in a positive?
Yeah. So I think it'd be something that is worth looking at, especially since we're looking at increasing sales tax revenue in any avenue we possibly can. And it's a good way to think outside the box and throw it out there.
So just for due diligence, let's have Andrea put it together and,
Sure.
just I'm sure there was some lesson, some reason the previous council voted down, so let's just consider all that. But I agree, certainly
I
circumstances
remember
have changed.
specifically the reason.
You're-
Especially now with COVID. The reason people were citing was because they didn't want all the traffic with FedEx trucks and nonsense like that. I couldn't believe it. And now, of course, with COVID, so many people mail ordered that I don't even see it as a potential. I mean, we just talked about how Angela told us how there was such an increase in sales tax due to this. And so we should be taking advantage of that and doing what we can. And it gives the little guy a chance to try and start something without having a whole lot of capital investment in and out of their homes. Probably create somewhat of a nightmare for Officer Kearns or Chief Kearns. in some respects, but I think it's worth trying. And if we could take a look at it.
Dan, I think the reason it was shot down is because of the parking in the city. Right now, there's not even enough parking as it goes for most streets, and there's a lot of streets that you can barely get a fire truck down.
Jump that hurdle.
I understand that the more sales tax, but the bottom line is I don't want a business running out of a house and having 10 cars parked out in front of my house where I can barely pull in my driveway. I think you got to look at what the cities actually, we're built on top of each other, and parking in Augsburg sucks.
All right, so debate is live and well on the topic, so let's, I'll have Andrea resurrect it and we'll get all the pertinent information out to council to look at. We're also going to be looking at, I think council's asked a couple times on the status of the package of zoning changes, et cetera, so we'll be getting that, resurrected again in a while and bring it forward.
And this brings us to citizen participation. At this time, anyone attending remotely would like to address council, please use the raise hand feature. We'll have 2 minutes.
I do not see any hands raised.
We do not have a need for executive session tonight, so I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Opposed? Adjourn.